Well, I am at the workshop of my furniture maker friend Andrew Lawton here in the Derbyshire Peak District, and Andy is someone who knows a fair bit about trees, especially English walnut. So for my third video in the series My Year of the Tree, I'm going to let the camera roll and allow Andy to reveal something of the character of this very English wood.
Hi. English walnut, probably the finest British timber there is for bespoke and high quality furniture making. Now the boards I've got here are from a tree which grew up in Northumberland. I bought the log as a sawn season log about 10 years ago from another furniture maker who mainly works in oak, and he wasn't really interested in the walnut, so I snapped it up as soon as I saw how good it was. Now you'll notice that it's got the waney edge on here. The sapwood has already started to rot away, which doesn't matter because we don't use the sapwood anyway. To the casual observer, this almost looks like a piece of old firewood. We've got some splits and knots here, various other defects, but you just watch this. I've got a scrub plane here. I'm just going to start planing the surface. It'll reveal the fantastic beauty and richness of the wood. Just by wetting it, it brings out the grain, which you can get an idea of how it will look when it's been oiled or lacquered. Walnut is probably the finest British cabinet making timber because it's got everything going for it. It's beautiful to look at, it's stable, it's fairly easy to work, and it's elastic and strong. It's got a lot going for it. But its main use is the fact that because it's such a beautiful wood. You get these fantastic patterns in, and every walnut tree is unique. Every walnut tree has its own particular grain pattern and colour, so it's important when we use a walnut tree to have it sawn into various thicknesses so that we can use it, maybe thicker boards for the legs and other parts. And unlike American black walnut, which is very consistent in grain and colour, English walnut each tree is unique.
But it's not just used for cabinet making, is it?
No, historically it was used for gun stocks, and still is for the best gun stocks, because it's, for two reasons. It's capable of being worked into very intricate shapes where all the mechanism of the trigger fits, and it's very resilient. It absorbs shocks better than any other timber, which is one reason it was used for aircraft propellers, and probably still is. That's one of its main uses in gun stocks, its resilience. You'll notice on here I've written on MC 16% and the date, and that stands for the moisture content of the timber. It's important to realise that with air-dried timber it will never get any drier than the surrounding air, and this has been seizing in an open, unheated shed. So what I need to do now is store this in the workshop, resaw it into nearer the size of the finished components, and check the moisture content until it's fallen to about 10%. If we don't do that, when this gets into a centrally heated house, the timber will shrink and ruin the job. But if we can get the moisture content down to 10% or less, then we know it's not going to be damaged by central heating.
So really what we're saying, Andy, is that we should respect the tree. You know,
we have to work with it, yes.
Work with nature.
You cannot work against timber. You have to be timber's friend and work with it. And what I'm doing now at this early stage is roughing out all the essential components. For instance, this board here, I'll resaw this on the bandsaw into constructional veneers, and this will form the facings for the end panels of the chest of drawers. I've marked everything on it, so I know at a later date which component's which. And this piece, I haven't actually got a use for this at the moment, but I know that having seen the quality of it, this will make up some of the other parts of the tree, of the cabinet. And you can see this board underneath it. I've cut the sapwood off here. I may or may not need to use this for this particular project. but I've made sure I've got enough timber, more than enough timber to complete the project. I'm hoping I don't have to cut into this, and I can maybe use it for a future project where I can actually make use of this serpentine bend of the tree and actually incorporate that into the design, maybe by putting an inlay between each of these boards and matching them together. Walnut always tends to be quite wasteful to use because the tree grows usually in the open. Walnut trees don't like growing next to other trees, so they tend to branch quite low down and often have knots and so on, which we have to work round. But what we can often do is incorporate some of the faults into the tree, into the work. Sometimes, unless a knot's particularly loose or defective, we could fill that grain there with an epoxy filler or something similar and actually celebrate the fact that there's a knot there. It's not necessarily a defect.
That's quite modern thinking, isn't it?
It is. At one time people would have said, oh no, we can't use that, it's scrap timber. But with modern methods and techniques and modern attitudes to timber, we can actually make a virtue of what used to be thought of as faults.
Yeah, I mean, after all, the faults, well, a good example is spalted wood, isn't it?
Exactly,
it's a disease, but it's a
early stages of rot.
And yet it's a beautiful decorative feature, and it's, I suppose, in a way that just illustrates our need to really appreciate this valuable resource, that we should celebrate the knots as well as the more perfect aspects of the tree growth.
I agree. Walnut English walnut isn't an especially rare timber, but it's not common either. So I think it's our duty to make the absolute best we can out of the wood.
And of course we have the age of oak, the age of mahogany and the age of walnut, but very little walnut has actually survived, is it?
That's partly because walnut's very susceptible to the depredations of the furniture beetle, or commonly known as woodworm. And often in the past, antique furniture was only polished on the parts that were seen, and the backs of cabinets and chairs and so on. The underneath of chairs were often left bare, which allowed the female beetle to lay her eggs in it. But we can get around that problem now by making sure every surface of the walnut is sealed and polished in some way, and that will prevent the beetles from laying their eggs in it. And I think we also have a responsibility when we use timber to think of the future and make sure anything we make out of the walnut has as long a life as possible.
So what are you going to make out of this, Andy?
This is a complete bedroom scheme. It will be a chest of drawers, a dressing table, pair of bedside cabinets and cheval mirror. And luckily there's enough timber in this tree, in this one log, to make the complete set.
Great. Sounds really interesting. Thanks very much.